I'm Aryeh Schwartz, along with my co-host today, Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the WNBA Insider Show. Each week we cover different topics important to the W, using X's and O's along with key stats to bring honest and critical analysis. This episode, we continue our breakdown of every team's 2018 season, with this week being the Atlanta Dream. Rachel, welcome. How you doing?
Hello, I am happy to be here. How's everybody doing tonight?
Hopefully well. News that we would be remiss if we didn't bring up: the WNBA Players Association has opted out. I guess we should, break this down a little bit. But, they opted out of the CBA. It was well expected by everybody. And to me, this is a long ongoing story that we're going to have many episodes on. I can sum up my feelings on this into like one or two sentences and basically just say, there is no reason for them not to opt out. As we all know, the WNBA has been growing over the past few years since the CBA has gone into effect. So in my opinion, there's no reason not to opt out. Even if there's only a 1% growth, then that means there should be a 1% growth in what these players are getting. And hopefully we're at a situation where we can give them better travel and health situations. So, I mean, I just see, why not go to the negotiation table and try and get a slightly better deal at least. Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you didn't know that by now, you must live under some sort of rock. But honestly, we anticipated it, we expected it, especially if you followed the league this year, and you kind of had a pulse on just the tone and the different topics being brought up, and honestly, really just society as a whole. I think you're seeing a big push for women really being vocal and standing up for more and pushing the envelope a little bit more, which I'm always going to be a huge advocate for. I'm excited to see what comes from these negotiations. I've got a lot of questions along with everybody else, and it's difficult for me. Is all the different ways in which I've analyzed this. It's very difficult because there is such a lack of information. And we can talk about this later, but I try to look at it objectively, and there's just a lot of information, a lot of numbers we don't know. And you're seeing a little bit of a disconnect, especially from the players and the league. Players are saying, hey, we don't have all the information that we need. The league is saying, well, we've provided that, or it's not available. And so for me, I'll be really curious as time goes on, what we in the media or even as fans learn about. But it's going to be interesting. I'm in support of it. I'm excited to see what negotiations come out of this. And I'm excited to, like I said, push the envelope even further.
All right, let's talk Atlanta Dream. Let's start off with something simple. I want to grade this season. In my opinion, it's an A+. Rachel?
I give it a D-.
Is that a joke? Or are you?
Yes, it's a joke. It's a joke. No, I think you're probably a little bit crazy if you give it anything other than an A+, or even an A, whatever, if you want to be critical. Since Aryeh, you're always so critical, I'm surprised you gave it an A+.
No, we've talked about this. They leaps and bounds were ahead of the curve, I gotta say.
They were. I mean, and honestly, you just never know. When you have a team, an organization that underwent as much change as they did this year. Obviously Nikki Collin coming in, and it's a big question mark. This has been a franchise that's struggled as of late. And so for this turnaround to happen as quickly as it did, and as fun as they were to watch, it was great. It was, and honestly, they were right there. They were so close to making it to those finals. And I know we'll talk about that here in a minute.
I mean, let's talk about Nikki in her first year. Going into the season, in last year's offseason discussions, I remember very much so saying, okay, I don't know what we're going to get from Nikki. I know that she's highly regarded. I have a high amount of respect from her. But this is a roster that she's only had so much control of. And being a defensive-minded coach, how can she get these players to buy into her system? And I got to say, she did an amazing job of that. Obviously, we know she won Coach of the Year. But her ability to withstand injuries left and right. Early on in the season, there was some pretty critical injuries. I believe Tiffany Hayes was down briefly. I believe Brittany Sykes was down for a little bit. Angel McCautry obviously went down at one point. And this team still makes it to the semifinals. their defense was their signature all season long. Do you think defense is something that, I mean, I know the answer to this is kind of like a foolish question for me to ask, but I'll ask you it. Do you feel that defense is something that it will be easy for them to transfer on into next year and into, speaking of which, Nikki did get a contract extension, so now we're talking a few more years minimum with her. Is this something that is easy to continue and like kind of be the staple of her coaching career, or do you have to buy into it every day, day in, day out?
Yes to both. I think Nikki is going to be the coach that's kind of what she's going to hang her hat on night in and night out. And she's proven that she can get her team and staff to buy into that factor. And along with that, we're talking about rebounding numbers as well. The Dream were one of the top rebounding teams in the league, which won them a ton of games, just securing the basketball and doing a job on the glass. And so that became their identity. That became how they were so successful. And I think that's something that, Nikki preached over and over and over. Is it easy to instill defense? Absolutely not. I think any coach in the world would say getting players to buy into the defensive end of the floor is one of the most difficult things you can do. Everybody wants to go play offense. But sitting down and being able to really have the grit and the toughness to defend and rebound the basketball is a difficult thing to do. But I do expect that this will be the Dream identity for as long as Nikki Collin is there.
Which I hope, because it was fun to watch, and we've talked about it a lot this season, you and I and Pat, how this team, a lot of their victories, first of all, there were lots of close games, but a lot of, which I think really helped them in the playoffs. That's a different story. A lot of these games that they won, really their signature, their landmark wins were all their ability to hold their opponent under their season average of points, which is a really good feat, especially considering some of the teams they did it to. I mean, we were talking about the highest scoring teams in the league, and they were just silencing them. Obviously, now let's flip it over to the offensive side of the ball. That's kind of where they struggled. Going into the season, we talked about a need for a three-point shot. They kind of answered that. And some of the questions during the season, the whole Laisha Clarendon story, Alex Bentley gets traded for her, and they bring her in, and that was kind of a spark plug we were looking for. But looking to next season, and we'll get into the roster in a second, looking at next season, what do you think is kind of a serious need of this team, assuming Angel comes back fully healthy and, everyone's healthy and back at it?
I think it's just an ability to really shoot the ball, whether it's just someone who can come in and kind of just be that sharpshooter, whether it is just certain players increasing their shooting percentage. But, just being able to be more efficient beyond the arc, I think is one of the biggest needs that they have. I think that can easily be increased. They showed moments throughout the season where they could really put up numbers. It wasn't like they were atrocious or it was they could score the basketball. I mean, look at Tiffany Hayes, look at some of the games Alex Bentley had. You could go down the roster. They even had a couple games there were over 100. And up in the 90s. And so I don't know that it's a huge glaring, this has to get better, because, well, let's be honest, they finished second in the league. They arguably had a chance to go into the finals and really be a true contender. And I think they'll be a contender again. But if they could find a way to just be a little more efficient, be on the 3-point line, add in, shooter that they could really rely on, and just increase those percentages. I think that's honestly what they need. That's just from my standpoint.
I agree with you. I think they have a really interesting roster. I mean, if you look at it, let's look at, just for a frame of reference for the fans, players who are under contract for next year, fully signed on: Renee Montgomery, Jessica Breland, Angel McCautry, Tiffany Hayes, Elizabeth Williams, Brittany Sykes, Amani McGee-Staffer, Monique Billings, and Alex Bentley. So that's essentially the core of their team right there. They have their starting, basically they have their starters and their key backups right there. For me, a very key aspect of this is having Angel back healthy. Brittany Sykes, at certain points during the season, in my opinion, was the 6th Woman of the Year. Obviously, I think Cheyenne Parker should have won it. But in my opinion, Brittany Sykes at certain points showed that spurt. When you have the injury, Angel McCautry goes down, it kind of put her in a situation that she wasn't able to be someone who just kind of picks up the slack and is that cherry on the top, versus she had to be that consistency, that inside presence. Angel McCoughtry is a great player, but kind of what you were speaking about, she is a maven of paint points. I mean, when you look at her highlights, the majority of them are her doing some insane move, twisting, flipping, jumping, whatever it is, doing all these ballet moves and getting like a nice shot or a close layup. But those are plays that are so close in. This team needs people that can shoot it. So that's what I'm looking for in drafting. They have the 11th pick. Let's find us a shooter, someone who can spot up. We saw them look at that in Diedrich. We saw them look at that in Maggie Lucas. That's clearly something they're interested in. Is it that simple, or is that an oversimplification for me to say that that's like the one thing that they want or need?
No, I don't think it's simple at all. I think it's just a weakness, a glaring weakness. And you could even go on, like just to kind of continue on about Sykes. I agree with you on your assessment with her. She's proven to be able to put up points. She's, I think the way she played, especially towards the end of the year, hopefully, when Angel went down, continued to give her a ton of confidence. She's someone who can shoot the ball from beyond the arc, and her percentages from 2017 to 2018 were down a little bit. So that's just one instance right there where getting her out there, knocking down some shots helps them. And I don't know, just within the way they play, do I feel like they even have to go get somebody? Probably not. I just think it's a matter of being more efficient as a collective unit beyond the 3-point line. But I'm curious to see how they handle it. I'll be curious to see what moves they make. And I think a lot of this kind of lies on Angel McCoughtry to some degree and how she returns. It's not like we're talking about someone who's, in the prime of her career. The big question mark, how much does Angel McCoughtry have left? And let me ask you that. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
That's a tough one. Honestly, I think this year off kind of puts her in the center of her career, maybe a little bit. If I always talk about careers in a sandwich, you have your beginning couple of years where you're still trying to gel into the league. Then you have it's not broken down by prime, but then you have like that, the meat and potatoes, the sandwich meats and the fillings of the sandwich. And then you have the end of your career as you kind of taper off. I'd say she's in that middle part still. She still has many years to go. Hopefully, God willing, whatever you want to say, she comes back at full strength, because I think she can do a lot of stuff. But again, this is a team that really excels in the paint, and I want to see some people really stretch them out to give her more ability, to give her more of a chance to get those points. I think it's really interesting because something I've thought about, and I don't know if we've personally talked about this, Rachel, but something I've thought about a lot is why we might see more action and movement in the free agency period, or just overall this next season in the WNBA. And I think there's a couple of reasons. One, with the CBA looming, there is going to be some renegotiations of the contracts, I would assume, which means right now you're getting a steal for any of these young players, or for anybody who really is in, an early on contract, right? Or even depending on where they're coming from, you would have to think to a certain extent their contracts are going to be better next year, or in 2 years, excuse me. But also because we saw how close knit this year was with, the difference between Atlanta and like the number 5 team or whatever was like 3 games at one point, I remember. I think a lot of teams are more willing to say, oh, if I get this one player, we could jump 3 spots that easily, just like that. But Atlanta's not one of those teams that I'm looking at and I'm saying, oh yeah, one trade or one signing. Honestly, I view this team as kind of in an oddly tough situation where it's like you really just want one of that right fit to add on to this team. And you're talking about a team that if Angel stays healthy, I think they go to the finals.
I agree. And I think you've got, looking at it from a coaching perspective, your core of that group is under contract, and you've got everybody coming back again. And I think it's kind of a luxury. You got to feel good about that with what you're able to accomplish this year. What can you fine tune with everyone that is going to be returning? And what can you maybe potentially have, trade for? Who could you potentially sign? That's not necessarily a big time sign. Like, they don't have to do it. They're not going to do it. So I think it's a huge benefit. I think this is probably one of the teams we will see the least amount of movement from.
Which is, with Rachel, that's interesting because last year, I mean, they had the two biggest signings of the offseason. Well, besides Natasha Howard, they had the two biggest signings of the offseason in Renee Montgomery and yeah, of course I can't say it right now. You know, Alex Bentley also, but Jessica Breland. Sorry. I mean, those were two of the biggest moves of last year's free agency.
They were, and honestly, it worked. And so, if it, again, like you said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think I'm guessing. I don't see a ton of movement. I don't think you need to, and I think you just continue to expand on what you did. And kind of see how year 2 goes under this regime.
So I have a question for you. And this is what I often like to do while we're talking. Something comes to mind and I blindside you with it. And hopefully you can figure out a nice answer. This does feed into a question that I wanted to ask about. Can this team compete with the new style of ball, this upbeat tempo, i.e. Seattle, that we're seeing in the league? But the real question I want to ask is, talk to me, put your coaching hat on for a second, Rachel. I know you never take it off, but talk to me about getting better offensively, because that's what we've talked about. This team has a solid defense. They need to maybe get a little bit better offensively. How do you get better offensively without reducing that powerhouse of a defense, without letting your defense lack? Talk to me.
Good. Let me just throw a bunch of cliches out there. Defense wins championships. Your defense fuels your offense. No, I mean, we could talk for this for hours and have
all right, guys,
so many.
Buckle down. We got 2 hours coming.
No, I mean, I can only speak for myself and just my own experience, and I'm very like-minded when it comes to Nikki and her philosophies, and whether that translates well to the WNBA or not, people can debate until the cows come home. But at the end of the day, they finished second in the league and had a tremendous year, and so And we've seen it the last however many years, maybe besides Seattle this year, when it was going back and forth between the Lynx and the Sparks. Both teams were in the top 2 defensively. So it's showing, like, historically, at least in these recent years, that, if you're in that top tier defensively, you're going to give yourself a chance. And I think that holds true amongst any level of basketball, whether we're talking about YMCA league up into junior high and high school, college. I mean, defense is what wins championships, or it can win championships. And if that's an avenue you decide to go down and make your identity and your team about, combine that with securing the basketball with rebounds and limiting second chance opportunities, I just don't think you can go wrong with that. Now, there's also a mentality out there of like, well, you can't be great at both. You can't be a great defensive team and you can't be a great offensive team. Which, you could probably analyze that to a certain extent and find some truth to that. But
I disagree with
that. You think you can be great at both?
Because I think a lot of the things that make a great defense, I think this is my opinion, and I've never played professionally. I have never played collegiate. My greatest contribution to a basketball franchise was getting a bunch of people who left varsity basketball to play in an intramural team for me so that we could win championships. I'm a GM. But I would just say a lot of the things that you need to be a powerhouse in defense are the same skills that you need to be on offense, but often people get single focused, so focused on we need to give that effort on defense, they don't give that same effort to get the offensive rebounds. How many times do we see people just like give up on offensive rebounds so they can hustle back and play good defense?
Well, that's one area of the game you could analyze. You could also analyze the standpoint of when you're getting stops and you're really like forcing the team into frustrations on the defensive end of the floor, whether it's causing turnovers, getting out and playing in transition, playing off those turnovers, whatever it may be, your defense can greatly fuel your offense, which I think happened a lot this year, especially with the Dream at times. So there's that other argument too. Like when you're getting stops, that's going to help you get, go down on the offensive end and have that much more confidence to be able to score the basketball. So I just go back to the fact that Atlanta, it's not like they struggle to score. I think earlier on in the season, they struggled at times to kind of get that flow offensively. But later on in the season, and I don't have the exact numbers, I'm curious to actually look at that myself. Later on in the season, what was their scoring like versus early on in the season? I felt like, to me, just watching it, they got a little bit more in a flow. They started scoring the basketball more. They were, like I said, really more of an offensive threat in ways. So I don't know. I'm not worried about it. Don't know if Coach Collin is or not. Hopefully I can ask her someday. We'll see.
Well, I'm looking at their games, and it really does look like, kind of to give you some props, which I hate to do, but it does look like, against the Aces, they dropped 109 in like their seventh to last game. They dropped 93, 95, 86, 92. Their worst game was their worst game in like the last like 12 games of the season was a 71. And that was against the Mystics, so that tells you a lot. But something I do want to talk about, because it was a talking point of the season, as I'm calling her the biggest snub, Tiffany Hayes. I think I spoke to you about this before we started this podcast. I think I saw a stat somewhere that like she's one of 2 players in professional basketball history to surpass her own stats every season for the first like 7 or 8 seasons of their career, or something like that. This woman has just every single season taken a large step in the right direction. And as I remarked to you before we started recording, in my opinion, she's a top 12 player in this league.
I don't know if there's, besides maybe like Brianna Stewart, if there's another player in the league playing with a level of confidence that Tiffany Hayes is playing with. When she joined the league back in 2012, she was playing, maybe a fewer minutes a game, averaging around 8.5 points, increased the next year to just over 11, increased after that to right under 13. Then it increased to, every year her scoring output has increased. And that's even with a coaching change. And I think you got to credit the Dream coaching staff to, having that confidence in her and recognizing what her capabilities are. I think we're going to continue to see her play at an elite level. And I will be shocked if she's not an all-star next year.
Oh, yeah. The amount of attention she's getting is just she got the proper amount of attention. And one of my greatest kind of jabs at the voters was Renee Montgomery wearing Tiffany Hayes' jersey to the All-Star 3-point contest. That was amazing. I remember seeing her walk down the hallway, and I just saw Hayes, and I was like, wait a second, she's not supposed to be here. And then I turned the corner, I saw it was Renee, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
You got to love the subtle statements.
The subtleties, yes. Last thing, Dream underestimated. Do you believe this team, we kind of talked about this and we've touched about this team surpassed everyone's expectations. I think there's 2 lines of thought. They either continue because they have that great defense and they continue with that hustle, or they have a sophomore slump, as it were, because this team did, make that leap in bounds. Give me a prediction for next year.
I think it's going to continue. I really do. I think we're going to continue to see a very similar brand of basketball with certain areas really fine-tuned. We're going to continue to see Tiffany Hayes, Sykes, Breland playing at a high level for them. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a certain slump, as you see with, a lot of teams at certain times. And it's not like Atlanta really started the year like setting the world on fire. They certainly ran into a couple bumps here and there, whatever, but then they really got going, man. And I think it's very feasible that they come out right out of the chute as one of those top 3 teams in the league, demanding that their name is up there in contention. But I don't think there will be a sophomore slump. I really don't.
My prediction is there will be a lack of respect during this offseason towards this team. When the predictions come out from the talking heads, they will not be in a top 3 spot. And due to that, we're going to see a fire in the beginning of the season that we just didn't see last year. And hopefully with a few couple cool roster movements, we got something cool. Do you believe that this team, assuming they stay healthy, can make it to the finals?
Yes.
Simply put.
And I think they easily could have made it this past season, and arguably should have. Nothing against the Mystics, but kind of depending on, you could say, well, was it because of Angel? maybe, maybe not. But man, that was close. I mean, we're talking a 5-point difference. So I mean, they're right there, and I think they're going to be there again.
I think if Angel, I think I already said this, but if Angel doesn't go down, I see them going to the finals. In this scenario, yes, Elena Delle Donne will still have her injury. We're changing one thing. We're not doing a whole butterfly effect. But I think not only does she bring those 5 points, but she would have brought a little bit of a confidence that I saw at times the Mystics had because they had players who had been there before. And you're talking about a very relatively young Atlanta team that just at certain points was looking around for somebody. And thank you, Angel McCautry, for being on the sidelines, cheering them on and being there. But it's a little bit more when you can actually be on the court. Any closing thoughts on the Atlanta Dream looking at the 2018 season?
No, this is one of the most exciting teams for me. And I want to take it back to Nikki Collin, who has done a tremendous job. And one thing I think it's important to note about Nikki is she is a great basketball mind who has been around the game in a lot of different levels, in a lot of different ways. But one strength about Nikki, and I don't think this is necessarily talked about as much, but she did a tremendous job hiring around her. With Mike Peterson, Darius Taylor. I mean, you could kind of, go all the way down, even into Jess Cohen, the athletic trainer. Shout out to my friend right there. But honestly, you could go right down the line. And I think Nikki did a tremendous job hiring in her staff. And when you're a head coach and you are hiring around you, you've got to bring in people that bring in, really complement your weaknesses. You have to be really self-aware. What are you good at? What are your weaknesses? And bring in people that not just work well with you and you can trust and are really going to know how to coach these women the right way, but also to complement you and your weaknesses. And I think she did a tremendous job with that. And shout out to the rest of the Atlanta Dream coaching staff.
Oh, I agree. Something that I'm dying to ask her when we get her back on the show, which we will. So, but something I really want to ask her and speak to her about is how, as a coach, players have the opportunity to really grow their game during the off season and focus on different elements of their game. How, as a coach, do you grow your game and, while also having these players these coaches around you that you've ID'd as like, that's a weakness of mine. I want to get better at it. But right now I'm going to, you know what I mean? Like kind of delegating that task and slowly disdelegating it or more, you know what I'm talking about? Like, how do you kind of grow yourself as a coach while still being self-aware, I think, is a really interesting topic about coaching that not many people talk about.
Probably not, at least if you're not in just that coaching world. I think you see just a lot of personal development. You see this time of year, a lot of coaches are going around really spending time at the NCAA level, whether it's with their buddies, whether it's with certain programs across the country. That's not just to benefit those programs, but it's to help those WNBA coaches really, continue to gain knowledge and pick each other's brains. I mean, the coaching world is very small. It's a small community, but it's a very close-knit community. And people are determined to really help each other grow and help each other learn. And so you see this world where coaches do cross over from NCAA to WNBA, all sorts of things. And there's a lot of questions asked. There's a lot of personal development that goes on. And I wouldn't be surprised if, this staff is doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, I got to say that. Rachel, do you have any other points you want to make?
I'm good.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This has been the WNBA Insider Show. I'm Aryeh Schwartz. That other voice is Rachel Galligan. Each week, different topics important to the W, using X's and O's along with key stats. We bring honest and critical analysis.